This is BBC News. A nightmare in southern Florida after a building collapses in the middle of the night.
Nearly 100 people still unaccounted for as rescue workers search frantically for survivors.
Witnesses say it felt like an earthquake when the building came down, and now the big question: how did it possibly happen? Mark this date, a bipartisan deal in Washington. Joe Biden announces a $1.2 trillion infrastructure package that has the support of Democrats and, yes, even Republicans.
We had a really good meeting, and to answer your direct question, we have a deal.
Also in the programme.
We're going to Ibiza.
Yes! British holidaymakers get the green light to jet off to the Balearics as more holiday destinations are added to the green list. And we all need a holiday. Look at this pretty tree that caused such an ugly dispute between neighbours in a leafy suburb of Sheffield.
Hello, I'm Katty Kay in Washington. Christian Fraser is in London. The unthinkable has occurred in an otherwise unremarkable part of Florida, just north of Miami. In the early hours of the morning, an entire portion of a large residential building simply collapsed to the ground. 12 stories, dozens of apartments, and at this hour, 99 people still unaccounted for.
When dawn broke, the full extent of the devastation was clear for all to see. On the left of your screen there, what the building looked like before the collapse. And on the right, the pile of debris scattered around the footprint of the fallen tower. The insides of people's homes were laid bare to the elements. We've already seen one dramatic rescue today of a young boy. Rescue workers are hoping for more. Let's bring in the BBC's Will Grant, who is there on the scene for us. And from the pictures that I've seen, Will, 2/3 of the building has just pancaked. So how do you even begin a rescue effort under those conditions?
Well, first and foremost, you bring in a lot of support, and that's what we saw. We saw scores of fire crews, of individual medic teams, of search and rescue teams sifting through every inch of the space. Of course, they've been doing that with sniffer dogs, and it's a question of how long they can go on searching that space and hopefully finding survivors. But at this stage, it's been going on now for many, many hours, and the numbers that you mentioned at the top of 99 unaccounted for is very, very worrying. Now, we need to make an important distinction at this stage that those are people who are unaccounted for, not necessarily dead or injured. The police have been at pains to underscore the fact that this was also a holiday home for a lot of people, so they may not have even been here. But nevertheless, until they can fully establish where everybody is, they won't get a full picture of just how bad this has been.
I know there were renovations ongoing on the roof of the structure, Will, but that doesn't cause this kind of collapse. It almost looks as if something has swept away the supports underneath.
Yes, I mean, you wouldn't think that work on the roof could cause this. I mean, there's a lot of speculation about what's behind it, whether or not there was some building code violation in its inception. It was built in 1981, whether or not there was just we're on the seafront, maybe the decades of sea spray and sun and wind and rain have impacted the front of the building in some way. It's at this stage hard to know, and certainly the authorities are far more focused right now on comforting the loved ones, on trying to establish whether or not the missing loved ones are indeed missing, and trying to sort of build from there.
Will, I saw that a number of Latin American migrants have already been reported missing by their consulates. Do we have an idea of who was living in this building? Was it one community in particular?
It isn't one specific community. Obviously, in Miami, the Latin American community is very, very large. We've heard Paraguay's consulate has said that they're missing nationals. Even the president believes that there may be a family member of his involved, of Paraguay. But I think that this is a reasonably affluent part of North Miami Beach. This is Surfside, a little north of Miami Beach. And so it would have been people who could either afford a holiday home, could either have that as their main property, But yeah, it's going to be a mix of people who live in this reasonably affluent part of North Miami Beach.
Will local media have been talking about sinkholes? Have you heard anything about whether that might have been a cause?
Just now we heard something similar. Again, it's just a little bit too early to speculate, but we did hear the suggestion that it might have somehow been undermined somehow, which again refers to what Christian was saying about that being more of a likely idea than something going on from above. But again, I think it was interesting that President Biden offered the services of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Authority, to help establish exactly what has been at play here. And soon, I suppose, the efforts will have to move from searching for survivors to looking for answers to some of these questions.
Will Grant in Miami, thank you very much for that update. I found a picture earlier. I just want to show you this picture because it gives you the best image I've seen of just how close that Bay Area is, Katty. So as it pans out, you might just be able to catch just beyond those gardens. That's where this is. So that idea of a sinkhole, not that far-fetched when you see how close it is to the beach. But what strikes me when you look at that is there are some fairly plush apartments right next door to the left and to the right. And surely they are demanding answers very quickly as to what has happened, because I wouldn't want to sleep in my bed in one of those apartments tonight not knowing what had caused it.
Yeah, well, we've been hearing that from local media too, that, look, we don't know, as Will is saying quite rightly, but if there is something to do with instability at ground level, and it does seem odd, doesn't it, that some kind of roof renovations, which is what it was, would cause that massive collapse of the building. If it is something underneath, and you're in one of those two buildings next to it, which are of a similar height and presumably a similar weight, I wonder what you're thinking this evening and whether you're going to be staying in that building overnight. It is Infrastructure Day. I know, I feel like I've been saying that for the last 5 years. But really, honestly, today, after weeks of negotiation, the rarest of things has happened in Washington. Lawmakers say they have struck, yes, a bipartisan agreement to fund the rebuilding of America's roads, bridges, utilities and communications.
Joe Biden made the announcement this afternoon after a meeting with a bipartisan group of senators who've been working together to find a compromise. The money on the table is probably a lot less than the president had been hoping for, but still significant. $580 billion of new investment. And flanked by the 10 senators, the president confirmed he was happy with what they'd come up with.
We have a deal, and I think it's really important. We've all agreed that none of us got all that we wanted. I clearly didn't get all I wanted. They gave more than I think maybe they were inclined to give in the first place. But this reminds me of the days we used to get an awful lot done up in the United States Congress. We actually worked with one another. We had bipartisan deals.
Joe Biden there. Well, with us is Republican strategist Ron Christie, former advisor to George W. Bush, and Democratic strategist Amanda Renteria, former political aide to Hillary Clinton. Ron, let me start with you, because Joe Biden just referenced the time when you used to work up on Capitol Hill and things used to work like that. Is it too optimistic to think we might be seeing a little bit more bipartisanship now in Washington?
Good afternoon to you, Katty. Yeah, I think it's a little too optimistic to think that we're going back to the good old days, back to the 90s when Speaker Gingrich and President Clinton were able to hammer out significant pieces of legislation because they were able to talk to each other and they weren't always trying to undermine each other. In this specific instance, I think the American people are looking for an infrastructure package. You had 10 Republicans, 10 Democratic senators who said, we need to find a way to make this work. And I think the real important thing that we saw last Sunday was Senator Lindsey Graham, the senior senator from South Carolina, who said, Mr. President, if you want a deal, you've got to lead. And I think the president really has done a lot to get this over the finish line.
Yeah, Amanda, infrastructure was meant to be the easy lift for the Biden administration when it came to getting bipartisan support. There are a lot of Republicans who like the idea of spending more on bridges and roads and things. But we've already had Senator Blumenthal, the Democratic senator, saying this bill, calling it pathetic. It doesn't bode particularly well, does it, for getting other Democrats on board? He might have Republicans on board. Can he bring the Democratic Party with him?
I think he can. I mean, we are now heading into the summer. People want to start to see their government work together. And frankly, this was a moment of symbolism that people were able to come together and get something done. I think it also speaks to that there are quite a few Republicans who wanted to actually show they were able to do something with Biden, with this administration, and in their home states to say, no, we're not just obstructionists, but we do know we need to work together to get something done. And this gives them that to do it. And I think Democrats recognize that we've got to do what we can while Biden can achieve some big wins and people need it on the ground.
What about the Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Ron? Because he's not shown himself so far to be that keen to help the Democrats. I mean, this would be quite a feather in Joe Biden's cap ahead of the midterms, wouldn't it? Particularly at a time when, Congress has delivered so little, and there's Donald Trump on the stump, someone who didn't deliver an infrastructure package. Is he likely to give him such a win?
Well, good evening to you, Christian. I think there are two components here. One is this smaller package where you had the 10 Republicans and 10 Democratic senators coming in agreement and alignment to give the president a modest victory. What I think is going to be the really difficult component to this is the $5 trillion in additional spending that the progressives and many of the Democrats are looking for. The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, today said that without the reconciliation process, a process that allows you to only have 50 votes plus one as opposed to 60, she said she won't budge. And knowing that what we just saw the other day, that all Republicans voted against a filibuster, so it shows you that the Democrats, not Republicans, the Democrats have a much more difficult time of trying to get accomplishments to the president's desk.
The thing is, Amanda, there was a twin-track approach to this spending. Bernie Sanders is working on a budget proposal which is much, much bigger, which he thinks he can force through Congress through reconciliation with only 50 votes. Do they park that and take the win, or do you think they continue with that?
I think you'll continue to see the dual track. So I think there's quite a few progressives who are not going to slow down, who say we need to keep pushing on this as we go into the midterm elections. But I do want to say what you heard out of Speaker Pelosi is very interesting, because she remembers back when she passed a climate bill and the Senate couldn't do it. And a lot of people were put on the line and lost races over some of those votes. So this time around, what you're hearing from her is, I am not going to put my membership, that is very close, I'm not going to put my membership until I know it can actually pass the Senate. That's a very different strategy, and it does mean that the Democrats have to come together with a plan before anyone's willing to put it forward. That will make it very difficult for a lot of these progressives, particularly Bernie, who are out there working to try and get a progressive agenda, if you don't have a speaker who is willing to put her membership out there without knowing it's a 51 vote count.
Amanda, 6 months into the Biden administration, what's your take on the Democratic Party and the power that the progressive wing of the party has over the party and over the White House as a whole? What are you seeing there?
It's interesting. So I think there are some very hearty discussions happening, but I think people are really see that it's impossible to pass things without 51 votes. And I think there's been message after message, lesson after lesson. What is very interesting about this bipartisan deal is a lot of the messaging that progressives were saying is, we've got to go it alone because you're never going to get a deal. Now that there's a deal, there's a window into being able to pass something bipartisan, it does make it more difficult for that progressive conversation today. And so that's really the symbolism of what changed.
I tell you what it does say to me, Ron, and this is why it's important from a global perspective and not just a domestic American perspective, and that is when Joe Biden was over here the other week, he was saying we have to show that democracies can work, that we can build, that we can operate successfully together. And this is evidence of that, isn't it? You can't be the leading economy in the world if your roads and your bridges are failing and you don't have state-of-the-art communication.
That's true, Christian, but I think there's also a sense here in America that maybe we're trying to do a little bit too much too soon. You have a $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill, which I think we all agreed was necessary to get the vaccine and move forward. Then you have another $500 billion bill dealing with infrastructure. And then you hear the Democrats wanting to do an additional $5 trillion. $6 trillion in one fiscal year. is a lot of money that even some Democrats are a little skeptical on. I don't know that you're going to get Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia, or Kyrsten Sinema, the senator from Arizona, to go along with this reconciliation process that we've discussed that would allow the 50+1 majority to go, as opposed to a 60-vote threshold to end a filibuster. So once again, yes, we need to have investments in our roads and our bridges and our infrastructure, but I don't think there's an appetite with such a razor-thin majority in the House and the Senate to spend that much money in such a short amount of time.
Okay, Ron and Amanda, thank you as ever, both of you, for joining us here on the program. It's tempting, isn't it, to say we've got bipartisanship, things are working well, but then when you hear what basically Democrats on the left are saying, this bill goes nowhere if we're not guaranteed that there will be future spending bills to address things like childcare, climate issues that Democrats hold very dear. And then you hear what Ron said there at the end. Actually, there's already enough spending happening in Washington, and they don't want these big ticket bills.
Pay for has been the big debate all the way through this. How do you pay for something so big? The only thing I would say in response to Ron, and this is the point Bernie Sanders has been making, is he's saying shove it all on deficit because interest rates are so low right now.
Yeah.
If you have to do it, and they do have to do it because the roads and bridges are creaking, stick it on the ledger because it doesn't cost you as much right now.
Okay, there is here in the United States an epidemic which the COVID pandemic has sadly exacerbated: opioid addiction. It has touched every kind of family in every corner of this country. And in the last year, the restrictions that have been put in place and the resulting isolation have pushed many people to breaking point.
Yeah, the latest CDC figures show that more than 90,000 Americans have died from a drug overdose in the year to November 2020. That's the highest number in 5 years. The experts attribute that rise to synthetic opioids and the smuggling of illegally made fentanyl. The BBC's Coralie Barrow reports.
People need to be able to find help.
You have to look for it. It's hard to find.
The coronavirus pandemic has turned all of our lives upside down, but it's posed a unique set of challenges for those dealing with substance abuse.
I relapsed in November of 2020 for a few weeks. You know, I went out and I got high. You know, it's been hard on everybody. Unless you got a really strong network and strong recovery, I can't imagine anybody made it through it.
This was the first Christmas out right after his...
Jason Leemanson has spent much of his adult life in and out of jail. He says he's lost everything as a result of his drug addiction.
The thing that's hardest for parents to understand about dealing with an addicted loved one is we want to help them get better. It doesn't work. If I'm brutally honest about it, which I will be, there were times when we were so intensely in pain over it that we wished he would die.
Gina Malagold's brother Dylan overdosed for the first time in April of 2020. She believes that the federal stimulus checks enabled her brother's drug habit. He survived, but recovery rehabilitation programs were far from normal due to COVID restrictions.
Apart from just 2 rehab clinics, which in order to get there, my mom had to say my brother was suicidal. That was the only reason he got in. Otherwise, they weren't going to, because beds were full because of COVID.
After testing positive for COVID while in rehab, her 28-year-old brother self-isolated in a family cabin. Days later, he overdosed again.
My mom called me out of control and crying, and Dylan's dead, Dylan's dead. Quarantine is not easy, and if you just got out of rehab, suffering with addiction, and have mental health, it's a death sentence. I miss him every day.
And then depending on whether or not they have a counseling session, they can go back to see their counselor or they can just leave the clinic.
Methadone clinics, like this one in D.C., are seeing record levels of patients seeking help.
When people have been relying on drugs as a mechanism to cope with whether it's physical discomfort, whether it's emotional discomfort, and then suddenly the drug use is gone, they have to learn new coping skills. And now we've added this additional stress of an unprecedented in our lifetime pandemic. It's much more additional stress on them.
The chicken, sobriety and cleanliness is a big part of that, is giving back and having those connections with people at the meetings.
As life is getting closer to normal for many Americans, people who struggle with addiction and their loved ones hope that the vital in-person support structures are here to stay. Coralie Barreau, BBC News, Washington.
Well, the cost of isolation on some people really has been enormous. For those of you watching on BBC World News, we'll be right back. The government is to impose a UK-wide pre-9 p.m. ban on TV adverts for food that's high in sugar, salt and fat. Products affected include chocolate, burgers, soft drinks, cakes, sweets, ice cream, biscuits, sweetened juices, crisps, chips and pizzas. There will also be new rules on online promotion, but firms selling junk food will still be able to run websites. Here's the Prime Minister speaking earlier.
Well, a lot of people are saying it goes too far. I think we're taking the right approach. I think that it's important that we send out a message that I'm afraid we do have a national struggle with obesity, and we need to deal with it. The costs on the NHS are vast. We've just seen during the COVID pandemic, sadly, how obesity can be one of the comorbidities in serious illness. Let's get a grip on it, and I think that sending out a signal in the way we treat advertising is entirely right.
British holidaymakers have reason to be hopeful tonight. The government has added a number of destinations to their green list, which means from Wednesday, British tourists can visit without having to quarantine at either end. On the list, the Balearic Islands, including Ibiza and Mallorca, Malta, Madeira, several UK overseas territories, and Caribbean islands, including Barbados.
Booking your ticket, Christian? Additionally, the government says that later this summer, people arriving back in the UK from amber list countries won't have to quarantine if they have been fully vaccinated. The Transport Secretary Grant Shapps said we expect that to occur in phases, starting with UK residents. Those travelling to the UK from amber list countries will still be required to take a PCR test before departure and another on day 2 after returning to the UK. So how's that gone down in the resorts? Let's cross to Ibiza, where Anna Holligan is waiting for the stampede to begin. Are they celebrating, Anna?
The champagne corks have been popping tonight. As soon as this news came through, we were in a bar watching. There were people jumping all over each other. As soon as they heard it, they've been waiting all day, bars, hotels, they've been monitoring the developments. This will have a huge impact because of the 4 million visitors who come to this Mediterranean island every year. 1 million of them are Brits. And in this resort alone, so this is San Antonio, the majority of them are from the UK. So the bars, restaurants, they're just waiting to reopen and yes, welcome those Brits back.
Are they bothered whether the Brits have had 1 jab or 2? Because, of course, a lot of people who go there would be in their 20s and might only have had 1 jab thus far.
Well, actually, Ibiza, the message is open already. So it has been for weeks. And we were speaking to the most senior politician on the island, the president of the Council of Ibiza. And he was saying, look at our vaccination programme, because here about 50% of people have now been fully vaccinated. So they're not worried so much about importing these new variants because they feel as though there's sufficient protection within the population. So even if there is a small outbreak, they'll be able to manage it, to contain it. But they are conscious of what happened in places like Portugal, of course, where they allowed the tourists to return and then there was a spike and then they had to kind of reel back on some of the easing of restrictions that had happened there. So it's a kind of a tentative step, but they can't really afford not to host the tourists. So it's about the benefits and the risks, and the benefits of allowing them back in. Well, at the moment, for most people here, they say it's sink or swim, actually, to save this summer season.
So Anna, Stefan, our producer, is going to go to Ibiza, and Christian's very sad because Stefan hasn't asked Christian to go with him, because Stefan is intending to party and he thinks Christian's going to kill the vibe a little bit. Are there
tell her what he really said. I said, can I come? I said, can I come? And he said, no, the older people tend to go up the mountain.
Yeah. I mean,
boys, can you stop
are there
fighting?
places that we could park Christian so he's not too embarrassing?
Well, there are some speedboats here, and actually, you know, it's going to be pretty different compared to the pre-pandemic Ibiza, because still, you know, people have to wear face masks in public. That's probably going to change on Saturday. The clubs are reopening, but dancing is still illegal here, so they have to make some really rapid shifts in order to make this the kind of place that has traditionally attracted so many people.
My dancing's always been
Anna,
illegal.
we'll keep Christian behind a mask. I think it'll work. Thanks, Anna Holligan, there for us.
Like the new Judith Chalmers.
Maybe you'll get
Anna
there,
isn't
Christian.
she? Showing us all the beach.
Right.
I was getting quite excited.
Bharat Mystery from Sheffield was happy to have a verdant conifer tree outside his house. It was, he said, a welcome addition to the road. But his next-door neighbour, not so happy. The couple had complained of nesting pigeons, dirtying their side of the divide. The two tried to reach an amicable solution.
Yeah, but that failed. And so Bharat Mystery's neighbour of 28 years took things into his own hands. He called a tree surgeon, more correctly known as an arborist, to chop down half his tree. Mr. Mystery was none too happy, but it has since become quite the attraction, with photos shared far and wide. In fact, there are people in Sheffield making special trips to see it, it says here. I tell you what, we definitely need holidays. If people are going to Sheffield to see that, I mean...
Look, we've got more bipartisanship in Washington than they've got in Sheffield at the moment over the trees.
Hello there. It's going to be a cooler day tomorrow with a northerly breeze, and some parts of the country will see a huge change in the weather. Now, this was North Yorkshire, Whitby earlier on in the sunshine, and we saw some high temperatures in the northeast of England today. 24 degrees in Alnwick, for example, 22 down the coast in Scarborough. Tomorrow, temperatures in some places could be as much as 10 degrees lower, and a similar change on the way for eastern parts of Scotland. Today, before the rain arrived, temperatures were into the low 20s. But that wetter weather has swept across the whole of Scotland. There's some more rain to come overnight. Heaviest rain earlier on was in Northern Ireland, but it's drier here tonight. We've got more rain in Scotland for a while, affecting Wales before pushing towards the Midlands and eastern parts of England later in the night. Temperatures may drop off a little bit in Scotland and Northern Ireland, but it's another warm one for England and Wales, warmer than it has been of late towards the southeast. Today we had some high pollen levels in England and Wales. It's more restricted to southern areas tomorrow, because these areas are more likely to get some sunshine eventually. But we start off quite cloudy with some outbreaks of rain. It'll slowly pull away from many eastern parts of England, continue to bring some rain in northern England, rain developing in eastern Scotland, getting close to Northern Ireland, in towards North Wales. To the south, some sunshine could trigger some heavy thundery showers later in the day. Temperature is going to be a bit lower, but as we've seen, significantly so in eastern Scotland and the northeast of England. And here we've got more rain continuing into the evening, a really dismal summer's day, and a few more storms breaking out further south across England as well for a while. The weekend, a battle going on really, high pressure extending all the way across the Atlantic to more northern parts of the UK, lower pressure in the south threatening some rain. Now on Saturday, most of the downpours are going to be the other side of the Channel. We could pick up a few showers developing in England and Wales, and still some cloudy, damp, chilly weather across southeast Scotland and northeast England. Fair bit of cloud for northern areas, but otherwise dry. Probably more sunshine during the second half of the weekend for the northern half of the UK, so temperatures are going to be a bit higher. Further south, we've got an increasing risk of catching some heavy, perhaps thundery downpours running across southern England towards Wales and the Midlands. Still a lot of doubt as to how far north that rain, though, will get during Sunday.
I'm going to be travelling in the company of some of the great writers who've brought the places I'm visiting to life.
Being in Africa, I was hungry for more of it.
This group of elephants is very, very peaceful.
Ordinary life was anathema to him.
Lorca is an almost mythical figure in Spain today.
Carlo Levi would have been the perfect person to paint this land.
From stories of glamour and success.
I'm only doing it because he likes it.
To idyllic rural retreats. Escape with the Greats this summer on BBC 4 and iPlayer.
Cinemas are open again and films are still being released to stream. Whatever your taste in movies,
What's your name? Cruella.
I'll keep you up to date with what you can enjoy both at the cinema and at home.
There's no final goodbye. I'll see you down the road.
in the film review, tomorrow evening at 5:45 on the BBC News Channel and on the BBC iPlayer.
The BBC World Service has always been something that has just given me a sense of anchoring wherever you go, that it's always accessible.
BBC World Service has been my compass. We need news that give us facts that doesn't distort our world.
I want news, I want science, I want facts, giving me the information so that I can make up my own mind.
The World Service definitely keeps people informed, and I love it.
Bringing the world closer, the BBC World Service.
You're watching BBC News. I'm Katty Kay in Washington. Christian Fraser is in London.
Our top stories. Nearly 100 people still unaccounted for after a building collapsed overnight outside Miami. A court in New York has suspended Rudy Giuliani's law licence over his claims of fraud in the 2020 election. Giuliani's attorneys have vowed to challenge the suspension.
And coming up in the programme, US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has announced a bipartisan committee to investigate the Capitol siege. Republicans in Congress have already blocked a commission to investigate the attack. And when 100 days becomes the journey of a lifetime. Christian and I began this show in the early days of the Trump presidency. Tonight will be our last. We hope you've enjoyed it. The US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has announced today she's forming a select committee to investigate the January the 6th attack on the Capitol complex, 4 weeks after Republicans on the Hill blocked plans for an independent commission to investigate the attack.
Democrats would have preferred a bipartisan approach similar to the commission that investigated the September 11 attacks. But without cross-party support, that wasn't possible. And so this committee will consolidate the House's multiple ongoing investigations under one single panel. Let's bring in on this, our last programme, our North America editor, John Sopel. John, lovely to see you. So there's been an outbreak of bipartisanship today. They're all sitting round the campfire.
Yeah.
Does that fuzziness extend to a January 6th select committee?
I can say this because I've been on your programme a few times before. You must be joking. Look, when it comes to anything that has a partisan advantage, both sides are going to play it for all they can. And I think the Republican Party see absolutely no upside for them in agreeing to a bipartisan commission over the events of January the 6th, when it was led by Trump supporters, having been addressed by the president to go and march on the Capitol. So they think that if there is a bipartisan report which says that the Republican Party didn't do enough to curb its supporters, then that leaves them in a vulnerable position. And so they would rather have nothing to do with this report. And therefore, when the report of the Select Committee comes out, they will just say, poof, that's all partisan nonsense. We don't need to worry about too much about what that says, and hope that the American people have forgotten to some extent the events that unfolded and the scarring events that unfolded on January the 6th.
And not just the events, the whole process after the election, John, when there were people very close to President Trump and the former President Trump himself saying that the election had been stolen, which is what led to January the 6th. And today we had Rudy Giuliani, the president's former lawyer, being disbarred for spreading those allegations. I mean, he said this is a freedom of speech issue. The DA up in New York has clearly said, no, he doesn't have that right.
Well, they said that he was demonstrably giving false and misleading statements about the election. They were trying to foment a loss of confidence in our elections, resulting in loss of confidence in government generally and the proper functioning of a democracy. So they didn't, and this is separate, it should be said, from the FBI raid on Rudy Giuliani's offices, which took place in April, where they seized cell phones and computers, which is all to do with Ukraine. And that is separate as well from a defamation case that is starting in Washington that's being brought by the makers of the voting machines, Dominion voting machines, where they say Rudy Giuliani defamed their company. So Yeah, Rudy Giuliani, not very long ago, was the hero, the mayor of New York, the leading federal prosecutor, the mayor during 9/11, who won global admiration, and now he has got a whole pile of big problems, and almost a metaphor for the way the Trump administration ended, if you like.
We got a very good example yesterday, John, of what happens in congressional committees. The Armed Services Committee were interviewing the top Pentagon leaders. Matt Gaetz asked the Defence Secretary how the Department of Defence should think about critical race theory. Now, for people who don't know, that's this theory that racism is embedded deep in American history and its institutions. Let's just watch the exchange. We got a response from General Mark Milley, who's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
How should the Department of Defense think about critical race theory?
Could I make a comment, Secretary? I'm sorry.
Well, I'm very limited on my time, General Milley.
Well, I just want to make a comment. The feedback
I know, but
I've
asked the question to Secretary Austin.
I don't know what the issue of critical race theory is and what the relevance here with the department. We do not teach critical race theory.
But I do think it's important, actually, for those of us in uniform to be open-minded and be widely read. And the United States Military Academy is a university. And it is important that we train and we understand. And I want to understand white rage, and I'm white, and I want to understand it. So what is it that caused thousands of people to assault this building and try to overturn the Constitution of the United States of America? What caused that? I want to find that out. I want to maintain an open mind here, and I do want to analyze it. It's important that we understand that because our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Guardians, they come from the American people. So it is important that the leaders, now and in the future, do understand it.
Quite an extraordinary response, actually, from General Mark Milley. It's been talked about a lot today. Matt Gaetz, incidentally, tweeted after that hearing, with generals like this, it is no wonder we've fought more wars than we've won. From someone who's never served in uniform, and you can imagine what kind of response that got. But generally speaking, John, we were looking today, we did our own calculations. There is a need to understand white rage. 11% of those who were arrested after January 6th were either veterans or had served in some form in the military. So there is an issue which General Milley's right, they need to understand.
Yeah, and General Milley also went on to say, look, he said, I have read Marx, I've read Lenin, I've read Mao Zedong. That doesn't make me a communist. I'm just trying to understand better other ideas. And I kind of think that that is such an important thing for America, for Western liberal democracies at a time of tumult, that actually there are other viewpoints that we need to understand of other people. And the trouble is that I think if you're kind of in the Matt Gaetz world, you only ever want to hear your own views echoing back to you. And here you had a general, the leading military grunt of the United States of America saying, no, we need to appreciate all sorts of viewpoints, everyone's viewpoint, so we can understand America better. And given the division there has been, it's kind of hard to argue with, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah. Matt Gaetz, by the way, of course, under investigation for some of his own behaviour too. You might think he'd keep a little bit quiet up there on Capitol Hill. John, thank you very much for joining us.
Hang on, is that it? We're not.
That's all we have time for. I've been told we have to wrap up now, John.
I've brought a box of tissues in with me for the weepy farewell scene.
Go on then, do the weepy farewell scene.
I mean, you know.
You get
Katty, you and I have spent too much time. Shush. Shush.
Oh, is that
This is my moment to say goodbye to you. Look, we've had so many good times together. We've got to see that, you know, look, you and I shared an inauguration shivering together in 27. Oh, there we are. What was with the Max? I don't know what. I look like Columbo.
Pink Panther.
You look rather smart, Katty, but I mean, I just look like I've been auditioning as an extra for Columbo.
I think you have a whole new career if you need one, John, as a private investigator.
Katty, you have been the best. You've been the best. You've been brilliant. You've been incisive. You could bring such intellectual clarity to it all. Honestly, we are going to miss you. And I think the BBC should have bought a padlock and chain and not let you leave that desk because you bring so much to it. And we're going to miss you a lot. Really.
We will still be friends and round the corner from each other. John Sopel, thank you very much for the kind words.
I endorse that message. The Biden administration has also agreed today, it's been a busy day on the Hill, to relocate thousands of Afghans who have worked as interpreters for US military forces. The decision comes amid concerns by members of Congress in both parties that the Afghans could be targeted by Taliban forces as the US withdraws from the country.
Yeah, today Mr. Biden said those who helped us are not going to be left behind. Let's bring in Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, who was pivotal to that effort. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us. There are something like 18,000 Afghans who worked as interpreters, drivers, engineers, and then there are 53,000 family members as well. What happens now to protect not just the people who work, but the family members? Because I'm thinking they must be in some danger as well, aren't they, if the Taliban start taking over Afghanistan?
Yeah, that's right. By the way, it's an honor to be with you today, and you're great. I'll echo your previous guest. But, you know, in a very serious moment on Afghanistan, yeah, I mean, you know, when the president made his announcement of withdrawal, it surprised a lot of people. And bureaucracy for years, we've been working these issues with special immigrant visas, because not just at this moment, but in the past, people will be killed waiting to come to the United States, which was promised. And there's a lot of bureaucratic slowdown. So I commend the administration today on the announcement. That's going to be tough to do. There's a lot of folks there, and that's a heck of an airlift operation. But certainly we're going to be here to help. It is essential to American national security and America's reputation that we follow through on this.
Yeah, I mean, presumably this operation needs to start like now, getting these people out, because even overnight, in the last 24 hours or so, there are reports from Afghanistan that the Taliban have taken over control of 4 more districts. I think that now puts 50 out of Afghanistan's 370 districts in Taliban control. What do you think is going to happen, Congressman, over the next few months in the country?
Well, look, the Taliban had always said America has the watches, but we have the time. They outlasted us. They outlasted our will. That's a whole nother issue. But looking at where we are now, I think there's no doubt, sadly, that it's going to be hard for the Afghan government to stay in place. I mean, the United States and NATO troops were doing a great job of stiffening the backbone so that the Afghan military could take the fight. When we leave, though, it's hard to imagine that it's going to stay steady. And so I think we're going to see human tragedies. Honestly, I hope I'm wrong. I hope everything I'm saying is incorrect. But I fear that we're going to see retribution against, of course, anybody and their family members that helped us, because we've already seen it a number of times. And then we're going to see women put back in, you know, 2nd or 3rd class citizen status. It's pretty sad.
Congressman, generally speaking, you've been a welcome voice on the right, and you've been calling recently for a kinder way of doing politics. I thought I'd just ask you what you make of today's bipartisan agreement. I can't actually think, while we've been doing this programme, that I've seen Republicans and Democrats standing together, laughing and celebrating something they've done together.
Look, I think it's great. And, you know, it's a reminder that we do bipartisan stuff every day. It doesn't, you know, it's not really the big stuff, but this is, I think, an opportunity for Americans maybe to take a deep breath and say, okay, the system can work, and then start to actually treat each other like human beings. I mean, this garbage, you were talking a little bit about, you know, what Matt Gaetz was tweeting. It's just this constant, like, drive to divide here. It's really dangerous to freedom. It's dangerous to a republic. And hopefully this is an example that we can work together. Don't sell out what you believe. Believe what you believe. Fight for it hard. But respect each other as human beings and quit seeing each other as the enemy. And also don't sack the Capitol ever again.
Amen to that. Congressman, lovely to have you on the programme again. Thank you for sparing us some time.
You all too. Thank you.
OK, we are going to take the remainder of this programme for ourselves, for which I make no apology. Because, as we've already told you, this is our last programme, and this is Katty's last day at the BBC, which I am genuinely gutted about. Because I think many of you who watch this programme will know that the two of us, in fact, the whole team that work on this programme, have a lot of fun. And I include in that team our very own Ron Christie, who's been here from the beginning, who I think back in 2016, Ron, was told, as we were, that this was going to be a short-term project. So what I want to know from you is, were you only paid for 100 days?
Because we were.
Well, good evening, Christian, to you once again. No, I was paid happily a little bit more than 100 days. Then I got paid for 100 days plus, and then I got paid for beyond 100 days. But beyond the amount of remuneration, it's really been rewarding, and that's really been the true treat of being on this show with you two and with Katty, of being so excited to wake up and say, I'm going to be with my two friends, Katty and Christian, and we're going to go have some fun today.
Look at those two thorns with the rose in the middle.
Yes.
Oh. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And Katty, what can we say to you?
Oh, that was chilly.
I mean, oh, that was the worst. So you'll see in some of these clips here that Katty and I have been on the rooftops. There's one in Birmingham, Alabama, that was beyond freezing. You just saw one in Richmond, Virginia. And I think that the folks here said, let's find a place to put Katty on a roof and see if we can sucker Christy in to be with her and make them freeze their tail off. And there we are again on another roof where it was so cold.
Do you know what? That was Super Tuesday and the roof blew off. Do you remember that? The roof actually blew off.
And then COVID hit and Christian never came back again.
No, quite.
Yeah, that's it.
No, he never came back.
Now listen, one of the things we became obsessed about on this programme, anybody who watches it knows, is animal stories, and particularly those animals that people take onto aeroplanes. Do you remember the dogs?
Comfort animals, very important.
The peacock, the Shetland pony, okay? And it must have rubbed off, because Ron, he's so upset, Katty, that you are leaving us. He's so anxious that he's got his own emotional support animal. Isn't this right? And there it is. Who is this?
Oh, look at this.
Who is this, Ron?
This, Katty and Christian, is Scout. And yes, Katty, with your departure, I didn't know what to do. And Jennifer and I thought, we need a comfort support animal. So we brought home an 8-week-old yellow lab who is in the process of destroying the downstairs part of our house, of chewing shoes, putting them in crates, but truly being the love of our lives. And as you both know, once you have a pet, you can't imagine what your life is pre-pet. And so our life now is all Scout, all the time, and it's only been 5 days. We love that little guy.
Oh, he looks lovely. I can't wait to meet him. Before you go, I know there's one thing that you like, Ron, and that is merchandise, right? Am I right?
Swag.
So, I mean, most people get a carriage clock when they leave a company, but I'm going to give Katty the 100 Days mug. Well, there was only one, actually, because we only had budget for one. And so this is it. It's actually been through a few incarnations, a bit like the programme. So it was 100 days.
That's really what I'm getting, is Christian?
And then it was 100 days plus. And then it was beyond 100 days. And then it was BBC News with Katty Kay and Christian Fraser, which, frankly, you'd need a Toby jump to get half of that on.
Okay.
So, anyway...
I'm glad that you splashed out, Fraser.
I'm going to send you this. It's not China. So it might get in. It might get past customs. It's not China.
Ron, Katty.
Okay.
We're still neighbours. I
love
have to meet Scout. Thank you.
You do.
For everything.
We love you. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, Ron. Now, on a personal note, I want to say something personally, because when I go out onto the street, people come up to me and they go, you're that guy who sits with Katty Kay. And I say, yeah. And how is she? She's great. She's great. They always say that. And they always talk about the chemistry of the programme. And I think it is the chemistry of the programme that has made this programme what it is. And you can't fake it. We don't rehearse it because we're 3,500 miles apart. And the reason it works is because Katty's a good friend. She's a good friend off the programme as much as she is on it. She's been a huge personal support to me. I've learnt so much from Katty over the last 5 years, and I know the team has. She drives us every single morning. And I saw a manager today who said, she's been here. She's been here since she was a girl. And I think you have. I think you've been here since Black and White. And she's been through so many things, so much. And we are going to miss you, Katty.
It was going so well, Christian.
The whole building's going to miss you, and we're going to miss things like this.
Hello and welcome to 100 Days. It's Monday afternoon in Washington, the first working week of the Donald Trump presidency, and there are big changes already underway.
So here we are in a small hangar. Air Force One's going to pull up behind the stage. He's going to get out to a rock star's welcome. I mean, this is made for television.
Yeah, and you can see why he loves it, because he arrives to these adoring crowds.
This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period. both in person and around the globe.
Do you watch those briefings and think to yourself, oh, God, I wish I was back at the podium? Or does part of you think, phew, thank God that's not me?
Definitely the latter.
Well, nearly 4 years after the UK voted to leave the European Union, Brexit has happened.
I want to buy something for Poppy, ideally a woolly corgi. No, Christian, don't get distracted. And I need to buy a flag. This is Beyond 100 Days, brought to you from Windsor, a special edition, with me, Meghan Markle, and...
And me, Prince Harry. Prince Henry.
Get the name right.
Prince Henry.
Yes, I'm ready for my interview. Why can't they be here? Why aren't they here in the studio? It's appalling. So disrespectful.
Your Majesty, we're very humbled, actually, to have you on our dear little show. Are you a fan of Beyond 100 Days?
Sorry, what? No, sorry, are you talking to me? I'm just looking at this bloody awful picture of me in the Times. Terrible, I look ancient. Load of old rubbish. Got my rubber gloves, just in case anyone wants to touch me.
So last night we went to a Joe Biden rally and we tried to get an interview with the candidates, what you do if you're a journalist in Iowa, but unfortunately our cameraman was very busy, so I had to rely on Christian, who practiced very hard with his phone. Take a look. Yeah, that was Christian trying to be a cameraman. But what happened, Christian?
Right,
we waited for an hour.
What actually happened was we had come out of the gym and I saw the bus and I texted you and I said, Joe Biden's bus is around the back of here. Would you like to come and speak to him? And you said, I'm coming, and you forgot to bring any cameramen.
Yeah, let's get on with it.
They all went to the Super Bowl and I'm the cameraman. I'm multitasking. Shall we see how I did? Here we go.
Mr. Vice President, how is your run going?
Come on, Christian. Look, stop. I know you're proud of your filming now. I know that you're very proud of your filming.
Katty Kay.
You got to try.
We are in the middle of nowhere.
That is what caucusing in Iowa is.
Where are we going to get a cab?
Stop whining. Come on, Fraser. Get a grip.
Bye, Joe. Bye, Joe.
Thanks for talking to us. Thanks for nothing.
It is Pancake Day tomorrow, Shrove Tuesday, long a tradition here in the UK and in some other countries around the world. Our Sergeant Major, who is going to put us through our paces, is the very lovely chef and breakfast TV legend, Rusty Lee. Hello, Rusty. Welcome to the programme.
I love your puns.
Do you love it? I feel like that's really Chef
Rusty.
off the Muppets. I perhaps look like it as well.
Yeah, you do. Yours looks real. You've made that, have you?
Yeah, well, exactly. I look the part at least.
Yours. Throw it up and catch it and shake it about. Throw it up.
Okay, Timmy, that went on the floor. Wait a minute. Stop. Okay, wait a minute. I can do better.
William. Yes.
Oh, that's pretty good. All right, are you ready? Here we go.
Go on.
Oh, no, it didn't turn. Hang on a second. It just won't flip.
I see Katty.
That's Katty there, yeah. You can see Katty.
I love her.
I'm here.
I see you.
She's so lovely. Do you know, it was like being in the Mutual Appreciation Society. When she came in, she didn't want to talk to me. She wanted to talk to Katty. She was waving, and she was nervous. She was actually nervous to be interviewed by Katty.
All right, shopping list: bread, milk, pasta, eggs, mayo, cocaine. Just kidding.
I love that. Right, so this is a retired Australian canine dog called Dante, who proves that his detective skills are still as sharp as ever when he hears the word cocaine. Just on a lighter note, Professor, so if your partner of 5 years is leaving you, and if you spent practically every working day with her, and then she just ups and leaves and goes off to work with another man, it is possible to suffer this broken heart syndrome, is it?
Absolutely, but I suppose the risk depends on the depth of that person's affection for the partner. So, in a way, if the injured party doesn't develop chest pain and develop a heart problem, she might have grounds to question his true affection.
Yeah. Who has Cher on their speed dial? Really, who has Cher? I've got a message for you. She sent us a message. Have a listen.
Hi, Katty. I'm going to miss you, but I hope that where you're going, you're going to have a great time, and I know you'll be wonderful, and I've loved you all these years, and you'll be great no matter what you do. It's Cher.
I'm on this programme as well, you know.
I think I'm going to reprise what I said in Iowa. Stop whining.
Oh, stop whining. Okay.
Get out while you're ahead, Fraser. Christian, it's been, what can I say? It's been great. It's been a real pleasure the last 5 years working with you. We thought it was going to be 100 days. Neither of us wanted to stop. The story didn't want to stop. The team that we've had, our team, which is not a very big team, but an excellent team, have been amazing every day. I don't think the audience realises quite how much work goes into putting this on air every day. The graphics, the sound bites,
my hair,
the guest ideas. It is Christian's hair, Christian's tie, trying to keep him tidy, trying to keep him stop filling it, put his lunch on his tie. It's just been a massive team effort over the last 5 years. I have loved every single day of it. I would not have spent it anywhere else. Boy, did we have a story. We had an extraordinary front row seat at one of the most important political stories of our lifetimes. And I'm so glad I got to share it with you. I wouldn't have wanted to do it any other way. We had the perfect format and I had the perfect co-host. So thank you, Christian, for everything. I have learned a ton, and I'm going to be watching what you're doing. And look, we took the very last of our budget and we came up with a very expensive graphic.
The Sharpies. The Sharpies. Right back at you.
Bye, everybody, and thank you all for watching.